Hello everybody and welcome back to the Two Norries podcast. I am your host James Leonard, joined by my good friend Timmy Long.
Hi everyone.
Rowan is on the decks. Say hi, Rowan.
Hi, Rowan.
And in the studio we have a man,
Hi there.
not a woman.
No.
Amanullah De Sondy. You're
Yeah.
an academic. You're an author of a couple of books, and your areas of interest is religion, namely Islam.
Yeah.
I follow you on Twitter, and I heard you on Neil Prendeville and all these other radio shows, and you were on the Tommy Tiernan show a few weeks ago as well. You come across really well, and we'd been looking to have somebody on of colour on the podcast for a while, but not tokenistic. I had to kind of fit with what we wanted to do too, and we had a few people lined up that pulled out or couldn't do it, and when I heard you speaking then it was like perfect, plus you're in Cork, so it's handy. So before we get into it, for the people that don't know you, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from?
So I've been in Cork since 2015.
Lucky you.
Yeah. And I am currently the head of the Study of Religions department at University College Cork.
Is that a big department and they have a lot of students looking to access courses?
Yeah, so we are fairly. I like to think it's a big department. There's about 8 of us, and we teach all sorts of religions. From I have a colleague who teaches Irish indigenous religions, paganism, to Asian religions, to Eastern European Christianity. We do a wide variety of
What kind of a profile of a student would access those type courses?
So we feed into the Bachelor of Arts. So at the undergraduate level, we have a lot of students who are interested in religion in terms of the arts and humanities. Yeah. And then we also have a master's program. We do an MA in anthropology, and then we also have PhD students as well.
Is that MA in anthropology with Dr. James Cuff?
That's correct.
Yeah, I know James. He was in the Department of Criminology and Sociology when I was over there. But how did you, before you came to UCC, you're obviously Scottish?
Yeah, so so that's the boring academic bit. So I, born and raised in Glasgow, to Pakistani parents. Gosh, what do I tell you?
Is there a big Pakistani community in Glasgow?
There is. So
obviously, a big Irish communities as well.
Yes, yeah. So my dad came to the UK in 1952. And my mum came to the UK in 1969, and they ended up in Glasgow. So my parents came from quite a poor village in Pakistan, in the Punjab, and they were, I would say my dad had the kind of traveller's itch. He wanted to travel around, but there was also this economic push, like, to care for the family. And my mum basically just followed him. My mum, she's a talented seamstress. She would sew clothes, and that would be a way of earning a little bit of money. But like my dad, when he came to the UK in the 50s and 60s, did a lot of kind of menial jobs. So my dad would talk about stuff that he did, and it was just an eye-opening kind of, when hearing it, because he would be talking about how he did bread making and thread making and worked in a butcher's, and then he ended up having a wee corner shop in Glasgow, which he had for about 23 years, and I'm one of 7, and so the kind of that was a big undertaking for first generation parents who didn't have a lot, to be honest, and so we were always kind of told in the family that get an education, because my dad always used to say, I don't want you to end up in the shop, because it was hard work. They
did well to establish a shop, like they're only in the country, like first generation, as you said.
Yeah, but at that time, when my parents came, there were the UK. It was actually a lot more easier to get a visa to come to the UK, because there was a shortage of people to do manual labour work, and so that was why my dad actually ended up there. But it's interesting. My dad was an amazing person. My dad passed away in 2010, and
what age was he?
He was 75, And, you know, before that, there's bits of his life that I'm only beginning to hear. Like, my mum was over in Cork a few weeks ago, and she told me how my dad worked in a weather station in Iran. My dad lived in Hong Kong for 4.5 years and worked at Stanley Prison. My dad was fluent in Cantonese. He was in Yugoslavia, Iran, Germany, and he just travelled. And my dad was a bit wild, if I could kind of put it like that, you know. And but, you know, Pakistani families are very, you know, you have to get married. And so my dad had a bit of a reputation in the village, and nobody actually wanted to marry him. But it was, you know, my mum was kind of always telling us these stories about how she kind of ended up marrying him and, you know, ending up in Glasgow. But it was it wasn't smooth sailing for us, to be honest with you. I grew up in a council estate, so we had a house, and the house basically was subsiding, and it came under compulsory purchase by the council. And sadly, my dad hadn't insured the house, and so the council basically gave us £100 for it and moved us to probably one of the roughest council estates in Glasgow, in Townhead.
And Glasgow is notoriously known as a rough enough city in the context of Western Europe.
Yeah, you know, I hear that all the time whenever I tell anybody that I'm from Glasgow. They're like, "Oh, I've been to Edinburgh." I'm like, "Shut up."
That's what we get when we're from Knocknaheeny. It's just like we're living up in Sarajevo in 1992.
You know, that's exactly the kind of response I've got. Like, people have said, "Oh, so there must be a lot of stabbings in Glasgow." I'm just, "Shut up." No, it's not, you know.
What about the sectarianism? Because we know, like, Glasgow, Scotland, and Edinburgh and Glasgow especially, you have that Irish Catholic presence and you have that loyalist Protestant presence. What's it like for somebody of your origin growing up in that? Was there sectarianism towards you, or were you like neutral in all this? Or
so, you know, I think it must have been quite difficult for my parents, you know, because somebody like me, somebody like my siblings, we can answer back, you know. You know, if we kind of know, and we can kind of also tell, you know, racism or Islamophobia doesn't necessarily have to be spoken. You can kind of get it in other ways as well. But I think that my parents probably had it very difficult. You know, like, my mum has quite limited English, if I could say that, and my dad was always somebody, you know, my siblings have always told us that, you know, as they were growing up, my dad always used to say, just you know, bite your tongue and just accept it. Just bite your tongue and accept it. You know, turn the other cheek. So I think it must have been quite difficult. But yeah, I mean, you know, Glasgow is all about Rangers and Celtic, right? Yeah. So, but there's a running joke now where people would ask you, so are you a Catholic Muslim or are you a Protestant Muslim, you know? And so there's
you had to pick a side.
Yeah, you had to pick a side, you know. But my response to that is, we're a tennis nation now. We did have Andy. I think Andy Murray's not doing very well, but hopefully he'll bounce back from that. But yeah, that was basically what I grew up in, you know.
Were you into sports?
Not really. No.
Were you always in the academic? Were you always an academic?
I wasn't actually. I was just. I had curiosity, but I never, to be honest with you, I wasn't very academic. I didn't really enjoy school. When I was 17, I basically left school and went to France for a year to study Arabic because I just didn't want to go. I just didn't want to go to high school. And then when I came back, I ended up at uni and I got in through clearance. I don't know if you have that system in Ireland. It's basically all they do the full list of universities, and if they haven't got a full enrollment, if there's a few slots left, they'll just basically take in all the TORAGs. And I basically got in that way.
Did that mean you would have to just take the course they gave you?
Well, yeah, to some extent, but I was always interested in religion, and actually, you know, because I'm the youngest of 7. My eldest brother had a lot of pressure on him to become a medical doctor because it's a very Pakistani thing to do. Yeah. And I really feel sorry for my brother, who basically, I think, got forced to become a medical doctor. And I have to say that when he was 21, he wanted to go on a skiing trip to Yugoslavia at that time. And I shouldn't laugh, but my mum took him to Pakistan and got him married to his first cousin. Yeah, I know. We can laugh about
half as fun.
I know. I can laugh about it now, and he's very, very happy with his wife, and he's got
That's great.
He's got 4 daughters, and they're married, and everything's great. But he was really the lamb to the slaughter. So for him there, who basically became the doctor, to me being the number 7, my dad. I remember my dad just used to say, you could do whatever you want.
You're the baby of the family.
I was the baby of the family. I was always interested in religion. Religion was always something that was in the house. My mum, my parents had kind of these ideas about religion that they had brought back from Pakistan, which was a mixture. I've always said this, even when I'm talking to my students, that we seem to think religion is something that it looks like this. But religion, when it's mixed with culture and your country, can be something. Look, like I think Ireland has a Christian rhythm that somebody from the inside won't necessarily see, because you just accept it.
Yeah.
In the same way that Islam is part of the rhythm of Pakistan, that was part of how my parents understood it. And then they were bringing that to Glasgow, right, to a council estate. And so in the house, we were very, very Pakistani, very Muslim, very Punjabi. And then outside, we had basically, Rangers and Celtic basically stabbing each other and, shit. So for me, I can laugh about this now, but it really, it gave me a lot of resilience. It gave me a lot to be proud of, but it very quickly meant that I had to understand who I was.
You're a naturally confident person, I can see.
I was, and I'm very grateful to my parents for that. But I was, it came with time. Like, you asked about sports. So, my research focuses on masculinity. And I wrote the first book, the first full monograph, book-length interrogation of what it means to be a Muslim man. And, that's a very personal thing for me, because when I was growing up, primary school and secondary school, I was really badly bullied. I was always interested in, for example, tennis. And my physical education teacher always put me into rugby, and I absolutely detested it. And it got to the extent where I was so badly bullied in secondary school rugby that the bullies broke my arm, broke my wrist. And all of this kind of made me, it left me quite afraid. And also, I think it's the very Punjabi thing to kind of, well, what do I do about it? I think for me, I've always gained strength from, this is a problem, I don't want to wallow in it, but what do I do to fix it? And I know a lot of people can't do that, but that is, I think, what has just made me go on. Like, like I said to you, I wasn't very academic, but every time somebody said, oh, you're going to get uni, I wanted to go to uni. Once I'd got my bachelor's, my advisors of study said to me, I said, I might go on to do a master's. No, you can't do a master's. I was a secondary school teacher, so I qualified as a religious education school teacher. But I was like, I want to do a bit more. And then my advisors at Stirling Uni were like, no, you can't do a master's. I went and did a master's. I did a master's on the history of Jerusalem. Once I did my master's, even my supervisor said, I go, well, maybe I'll do a PhD. No, you're not going to be able to do a PhD. And then I ended up at Glasgow Uni, and I did my PhD on masculinity. And I kept going, I think I kept going in all sorts of directions, history of Jerusalem, and I was just like, this isn't me, and then I ended up doing my PhD on something that was actually about me, if I'm brutally honest, that I think a lot of university people don't really concede this, that our university, our academic work is so inextricably bound to us, but we've been trained in a university system that doesn't allow us to say that out loud. And so for me, my conviction, my strength is because I have to battle this every day. Like, I wake up, every day, and I get it from all sides. I get it from the Islamophobes who tell me that, oh gosh, who on earth are you to come here in Cork and teach us about Islam? And I also get it from my fellow Muslims as well, who are like, you're teaching this very unusual Islam, or you live this very unusual Islam that they would not deem as mainstream. I talk about queer Islam. I talk about, mystics in Pakistan and India who are drunk, and, who are, there's a community of mystics who believe in doing things they call mendicants, right? So they identify as heterosexual, they wear women's clothing, they'll be high on something or another, and they'll believe that they're the brides of God. And I've always found that really fascinating, because these are my people, right? And at some level, I connect this to a lot of what I've seen in Glasgow, and what I've seen in Glasgow, I connect to where my parents came from in Pakistan in ways that just makes the world a wee bit, not as far apart in the way that we seem to think about it.
Yeah, can I ask you a question on the masculinity and Muslim men? Like, is it... And apologies now if I come across as fucking ignorant, right? Because I know very little about Muslim people or Islam and that religion. But, like, if I'm Christian or Catholic man, born a Catholic, not practicing, but I would say I have faith and I pray and all these things. But if you're a Catholic in Ireland and you're a Catholic in Italy, obviously it's two separate cultures as well. So if sometimes we can look at Muslim men on television in one country and kind of brand all 1.8 billion Muslim people as this person. I'd say that must be very frustrating for you.
It is, and that's basically, half, I think maybe even more than of my teaching in UCC is about that, is about trying to get my students to see there's more than one way to understand Muslims or to see Islam, and that there are over 1 billion Muslims in the world, and no two of them are alike. Like, I can't even get my own siblings to agree with me. How on earth am I going to get somebody in another country to agree with me? And I think that once you break it down to that, you break down this idea that we've put in our head about the other, because the other is always something that we can either draw closer to us, or we can push away and say, that's you're odd, stay away. And I just think that, if you can challenge yourself by mixing up a wee bit and kind of saying, okay, I don't quite see myself in you, but how does my interaction with you allow me to understand my uniqueness a bit better? And that, we all win. We all win when we do that.
What a good way to put it.
Totally.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
And we're all about kind of, I always think of travel or community when it's similar. We look at a negative headline and we just say all travellers are criminals, they don't work, and all these things. And I don't like that. And another thing in Ireland we have a habit of doing is all those foreigners coming over here taking on jobs, as if we didn't fucking destroy UK jobs market and we didn't build America, and we still actually continue to do that today. There's so many of our generation in Australia and Canada that left after the recession. But like, this idea of borders can be very divisive for people. But what do you think about radicalization, and is there a difference between if a young person grows up in Cork City, right, and the young person there's lots of poverty there, mental health, addiction in the home, and he goes to the street and he sees a way of getting out of that life, and he's groomed into a gang, and he ends up committing atrocities, crime, violence and all that stuff. And then same guy is born in Iraq, grows up in this very hard life, and he goes to the street, and there's this group of men that's offering him better quality of life, but he has to do this. Isn't both of them radicalization?
But you're talking about radicalization. What I would say is, look at this individual. What have we, and I bring that as a collective what have we done for this individual to want to do this? And it could be, this can be anything. I don't really, without kind of giving away too much, but, in my family, there's, in my extended family, there are issues of addiction that, we grew up with and seeing it up close. And it's very hard to kind of offer a very concrete conclusion. Oh gosh, you just ended up like that because, and it's never that simple, and I've seen it so much that, when you actually begin to see, where did this person come from? I want to know what happened to this person in their early life that made them want to do that. And that was why I got really interested in masculinity. It was very personal to me. I think I came out of it well, but I've seen so many people kind of suffer, and you suffer for many, many different reasons. It could be a societal thing. It could be a religious thing, because, religion can be something wonderful, right? Because when I talk to my students, and they say, some of my students are like, religion is awful. Do you know what religion did? Do you know what the priests did? Do you know what this and X, Y, and Z? And you know what the nun? And I always say to them, okay, I'm not wanting to change your mind on that, but you also have to look at the other side, which is that this concept of charity, this concept of giving something to someone who is less fortunate than you. It was actually Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that put that into a system. And they kind of look at me and they're like, well, I go, because I ask you the question, why on earth do you want to love your neighbour? Why on earth do you want to give charity to somebody? And they're like, because it's the right thing to do. I go, but the thing is, you have to think about the whole, kind of the journey of why we've got to the stage where we think that's the right thing to do. Like, do not kill, right? Why don't we kill? Why do some people do this? And then it goes into, you can go into all sorts of kind of discussions. Like, I just said to you that there's groups of Muslims who believe in smoking this and drinking this, and in that intoxication they want to get closer to God. But we also know that this can take you onto a very dark space. My religion has talked about that. This is why the majority of Muslims don't drink alcohol. And the reason for that is because in my tradition, there's the idea that too much of intoxication will firstly take you away from the remembrance of God, but there's also other stuff that can happen. Look, there's a whole variety of people who will kind of go from not drinking to
I think religion is a good thing, and I think that humans are innately spiritual, and we need something outside of us. But the problem at the moment in Ireland, as I see it, is the predominantly Catholic country that's not so Catholic anymore, and the void is being filled by culture, and a contemporary culture isn't so helpful for your health and well-being. And our new deities, our gods now can be influencers, it can be advertising, and that's like there's very difference between religion and culture, really.
I suppose where that also depends is the actual person and where they are on their own journey. Because, for example, we had a lady on here last night as well, talking about her story, and
Hazel,
thinking a lot about her own situation and the people that were doing stuff to her. And it was happening when they were all kids, okay? It was all mad shit went on. No, I won't get into it. But I was saying, like, how does a child fucking do this? Like, it's a child's brain. They don't understand what they're doing, And I'm on about the men. They don't understand. And they go on and they go on. And it can be very, like, it can be very, like, we then as a collective, as a society, when something goes into the media, we slaughter that person that does that action. We slaughter. What happened? This girl was fucking inexcusable, okay? But sometimes we don't actually even know what kind of, how these people's heads are, what happened when they were probably brought up in situations that the shit that was going on that they were doing was normal. They thought it was how you act, or how you know, it's complete. So it's such complex area. It's so complex.
Yeah.
And as human beings, I don't think we understand how complex yet that kind of whole nature and nurture thing is. It's so out there. But another point I wanted to make is, when somebody does come into, they go through their life, like we were brought up as Christians, you know, Christian school, religion was a massive thing. You do this, you're going to hell. You know, you're going to hell. I was shitting of God. I feared God and hell and everything so much. But as time went on, and I went into addiction, and I came out of addiction and everything else, I found something else,
right,
which is spirituality.
Yeah.
Which is not that it's any God.
Yeah.
It's the love within me.
Yeah.
It's nothing else. It's just about listening to the gut, doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know, don't always get it right.
But that's everybody's journey, isn't it? Like when I teach my first years in religion, I always say to them, look, we're going to give you so many different boxes and all these different religions, but what you'll be able to find within all of them are answers to 3 of the ultimate questions that everybody is on a journey of. And we may not ask these questions directly, some of us might, but it's, where did I come from? What on earth am I doing here? And where am I going to end up? And it's trying to find the answers to these 3 questions that can lead you into all sorts of different directions.
Yeah.
Some very, very good, helping others, loving your neighbour in a good way, you know, or it could take you in, somebody could say, my purpose in this life is just, you know, I've had so many people who say to me, oh, it's just fun. I want to have fun. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And there has to be an ethical answer to this. And that means that we all soul search about what's good and what's bad. And there's no right or wrong answer to this. It is sadly my co-religionists who have bombed, you know, have done horrible things to good people in the name of my religion. Yeah, I also know that there are people who, you know, who are feeding the hungry, feeding the poor, helping people through all sorts of different experiences, and it's all they're trying to find that answer of what is my purpose on this earth.
Yeah, and I suppose your journey is that purpose. You're like, people forget that they're searching for their purpose instead of just understanding their purpose is in that moment. Absolutely. What they're doing. Yeah, it's not an end story or an end picture or an end job. It's no, your purpose is where you are now, what you're doing now. Yeah. That's your purpose.
Yeah. I never in a million years ever thought that I would get to this stage in universities. No. And I'm not honestly not being, you know, modest. I never thought that. I just my drive was to continually ask questions. I had this continual thirst to ask questions, and very difficult questions. I once asked an imam, I said, we Muslims have to pray 5 times a day. What if we die and there's no God? And I could see the look on my friends' faces in that classroom. They're like, what the hell are you asking? And the imam was amazing. And he goes, okay, if there's no God, at least it would have given you some discipline in your day. And I thought, oh, that's a good answer. You know, it was just...
Do you know what that's like? It's like when you're a child growing up in old Catholic Ireland, really, and you're being told... about what your sins are. Oh, I told my sister for F off or whatever it may be. Oh, you have to say you're going to hell or whatever, and all these things. And then later on you start to think, like, if God is supposed to be all good and all love and everything else, why would he send me to hell for telling my sister to F off?
I know. See, that was fear driven back in the days.
It's so, like, we're so, it's, and it does cripple, because I'm a young child, he's 10, and he was in school, whatever, and there's an elderly lady in the school, and She's still old school kind of religious and stuff like that, and we were talking, and then he said something about hell and sins and stuff, and I looked at him and I says, who said that to you? You know, because I don't want my kids listening to that stuff, you know, because I know the fear it'll instill into them.
Yeah.
You know, and I says, and I sat him down and I talked to him nice and gently. I said, that's cool. Some people have different beliefs to others. Some people are still kind of believe things like this. I says, but no, I want you to listen to me. I says, we all make mistakes. You're not going to hell because you make a mistake. You know, God loves you no matter what. No how many sins you make. You know, you're always going to, and he says, is there heaven? I says, it's my belief your heaven is here on this earth. It's a place of being. It's a place of, it's your where you are in your head. It's where you are in your body. It's where you are with people. It's everything like that, you know.
I think religions as well, you know, like the thought of being on this earth as an animal that's going to die is a very frightening prospect. I think religions, first of all, it gives us a bit of security, a bit of scaffolding around of, this is who I am, I'm a part of something, I've something outside of me that's going to help me along my way, and at the end of the road I'm going to go here, and all of a sudden life becomes more manageable, and I don't have this existential dread of, I'm going to die. So I think religion serves a great purpose in that. But
the most important thing is no matter who tells you that religion is black and white, that this Christianity says, or Islam says, or Judaism says, they're talking nonsense. It doesn't, because religion doesn't speak. It's people who speak. And so the different people that you meet, you'll also hear different ideas. And this is why I think, gosh, you're taking me down the route of God. This is why I think this idea of God, whether you believe in it or not, is such a fantastic idea. It has sustained for so long because you can understand God and it can make you do so many different things. And that is where I think it's really important to allow a personal search in everybody. You know, there's a big debate right now about religious education in schools in Ireland and whether it's important or not. I think studying religion is really important because you have to, as long as you allow the individual, your kids, whoever it is, as they're grown up, to have their own personal search. No, you can't force feed ethics. You can't force feed anybody to do, but you can make individuals think and reflect on what's good and what's bad. Even when my students say, I don't believe in any religion, I say, but you're asking the same questions about what's right or wrong in your everyday life that a religious person's also asking.
That can be great. That can be absolutely great when the hell is taken out of it and you're going to hell because of sins and all. Religion can be a great thing because it's my belief now that God is nothing else but just love, complete and utter love, and there's no such thing like there's no God going to send anybody to a place where it's fire. Reasons being because God knows everything, and God completely understands why a human being behaves in some way because of their upbringing, something that may have happened to them, changed them along the way. How do you judge somebody if
I think
don't
that's
even
a big
know?
problem about
judging. How do you judge somebody on an action where they're only acting on stuff that they were taught growing up? You know? So I've often thought about it in that respect, that if God knows everything, God is certainly not going to send that soul anywhere to make it worse again because they never knew any better in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you sound like a theologian. You know more about this. You've got more questions on this than me. I always just kind of stand back and I'm just like, you know what, these are the kind of issues that are going on. But again, I think that is really important to do, and a lot of people are afraid to have these conversations now because, you know, there used to be a time when I used to love flying, and I would, you always end up having a wee conversation with the person sitting next to you. I used to always not want to say I teach religion, because the conversation could go in any direction. And when you say you
people
teach
can
Islam,
get fanatical about it.
Yeah, but at the end of this, I also think that we also have to appreciate that people who have no faith, people who don't believe in an organised religion, or people who don't believe in God, they, I can't even believe I'm having to say this, they live full, ethical, good lives. And the thing is that what we've done is we kind of sometimes say, but if you don't have Christianity, if you don't have Islam, then surely you can't really be. And I don't believe in that, because I really think, and I really believe this, and a lot of my own Muslim friends would probably disagree, I don't think that any faith has a monopoly on truth. I really think that your truth can be very, very different. All I wish to see is that we can arrive at something that's some measure of ethical, or some measure of, please don't kill me.
Yeah.
Right? And I know that sounds quite simplistic, but we haven't. For how long have we been civilized as human beings? Yet we still kill each other. Yeah. And it's not just the physical, it's the mental abuse that religion can be weaponized.
It can be, yeah.
And it can cripple people. This is why I wanted to find out, what is it? Is there only one way to be a Muslim man? Because all I kept hearing was, you have to be married and you have to have kids and you have to, live up to this. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is such a huge burden, mental burden on so many Muslims around the world. And when I was studying this, I just, and I thought, but there's also God in this. There's also your culture in this. And I'm thinking about my parents who came from Pakistan. And it just made me kind of realise that, there's so much going on in how we kind of understand that. But, one of the things I kind of researched and found out is that the Quran, right? The Quran is what Muslims believe in. It's a book. It's a divine text that has all sorts of men in it. It has prophets in it, like Jesus. Yeah. Muslims believe he's a prophet, who didn't even have a dad. We don't even know whether Jesus got married and had 2.4 children, which we keep hearing about. And
a dog called Spot.
Exactly. We hear about the prophet Joseph. Joseph. You all know Joseph and his amazing who falls in love with his stepmom. The Islamic sources are very, very explicit that he's about to have intercourse with her when he actually gets a revelation from God saying you can't have sex with her because she's your stepmom. I mean, there's ethical issues going on over there. It talks about love, it talks about sex. Then you have the Prophet Muhammad, who is the last prophet in Islam. He gets married, he has kids, his wife dies, and then he has 11, 12, 13 wives. I mean, you really have to think carefully about how on earth are you still being presented with this one way of being Muslim and male.
Yeah.
But what holds it all together is this belief in God. Because the relationship that an individual has, whether they're male, female, or transgender, or whatever way they identify, that relationship that they have with God cannot be replicated between anybody else. My relationship with God cannot be, I can't, it's not duplicated in any other person. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Right? Which means that the Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet Joseph, Adam, all of these prophets had their own singular relationship. And there's something to be learnt that I believe at the very core of Islam, and I think by extension Judaism and Christianity, is the internal diversity. We are all very different and we all have different paths to God.
And the Quran and the Bible, and other religious texts, they've been written at a specific time in history by individuals, mainly men. Yeah. And if you look at the Bible, because I'd be more familiar with that, obviously, there's so much wisdom in that book that can give us a guide of how to what is a good life, what is the good man, ethics, morality. All these things are these guide us along the way. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in it that's not helpful to you, but you take from it the good stuff, and you have to park all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you think that it's a problem when people get into the minutiae as justification for some negativity?
You can justify anything. My co-religionists justify killing innocent people in the name of God. And that's not something particular to Muslims. You have the Crusades in Christianity. You have all sorts of wars that are done in the name of God.
The Serbs.
Absolutely.
Murder.
But what you need, what I really believe is, you always need a counter narrative where you have somebody who is, for me, and I'm speaking personally, this scary form of masculinity in the form of Osama bin Laden. And everybody knows, when I say Osama bin Laden, that image comes to in your brain, right?
Yeah.
Turban, beard, oh gosh, what did he do? I always say, I must counter that. And I counter it with, I don't know, many of your listeners, maybe you have, if you've ever been to Turkey.
Yeah,
right?
I have been, yeah.
You've been to Turkey and you'll be aware of the mystics who, they wear long flowing dresses, and the guys and the women and whatever way they identify themselves, they just whirl all day long to music. And they're going round in a circle, dancing in a trance, because they are remembering the unity of God. And that they're remembering God. And I think, how many times have we been presented with that form of Islam, that form of gendered Islam? But all we see, you Google, you Google image, right? Muslim man or Muslim woman. Gosh, you just see it. You just see what comes up.
It won't take too long.
No,
for him to pop up.
We've been conditioned. We're such a visual entity now. We've got our Instagram and we've got our Snapchat, and you don't even need to say anything now. You just put a picture in front of people and you're just like, this is it. This is a Muslim man now.
Yeah.
And the power of that, it's actually part of my job of getting students to unread a picture and getting them to read something more than just seeing a picture is a big thing. And it's the
same.
Yeah.
If you say the north side or whatever, it's
Yeah.
the same kind of analogy, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like if you look if
you look at an area.
Yeah, like this here, right? That's the reservoir in Knocknaheeny. It's a big water tower on the top of the hill, close to Apple Computers European headquarters.
Okay.
It's the emblem of our area.
Right.
But it can sometimes be an emblem of Knocknaheeny, which brings a lot of negative connotations.
Right.
So we wanted to use that as like, no, this is something that we should be proud of.
Yeah.
And there's not all negativity, and there's a lot of positive stuff comes from this area too.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
do you
And
know,
I totally resonate with that, because when I tell people that I'm from Toonhead, they're like, you're from Townhead? I'm just like, yeah, and I'm actually very proud of it.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of being from Townhead, and because that's where I got high-rise flats, mothers and sons and daughters, swearing this and swearing that, and I'm just like, that was home. That was where I grew up.
Yeah.
Seeing through all of that difficulty and just kind of pushing through it,
Exactly,
So,
and the resilience that the people in those neighbourhoods have, and the community spirit and all these things that you won't get in the more affluent areas, or maybe not in as much as abundance. But one thing I wanted to ask you about there was denominations within Islam.
Yeah.
And the difference between a Sunni Muslim and a Shiite Muslim.
Right.
And if you can explain the conflict or the causes of it.
That's just like, gosh, how many hours do you have?
Maybe the dummies version of it.
So basically, you have, they're largely kind of theological. They're just very, very minor disagreement on, for example,
like Protestant Catholic type of.
Kinda.
Like we're both Christians.
Yes.
But we kind of disagree on some details along the way.
Absolutely, yeah. So basically what you had was, after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the community was like, okay, so who's going to lead? There's no more prophets coming. Is it going to be from the Prophet's bloodline, or are we going to elect somebody? And so, that's a very, very simplistic way of kind of talking about it. But you just had disagreements. And you had different branches of the community that kind of developed. But I think that was kind of inevitable. I'm Sunni.
Okay. Is that the biggest community?
Yeah, and again, I find that very difficult, to respond to that, because you kind of think, all right, so you know, the largest percentage are Sunni, so there's a small percentage of Shia, and I'm sure you have that. Actually, I've had conversations like this with my students about Catholics and Protestants in Ireland, that you know, even when I was moving to Ireland, people used to say, oh, you know, Ireland's a Catholic nation, or actually somebody said to me, oh, Ireland's very post-Catholic, and I'm like, what
Never
does
heard
that
of that
mean?
one, I know.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. But again, it's our preconceived ideas of what somebody should look like or what to expect. Like, I've said this so many times, but you know, before I moved to Cork, I actually had a really intelligent person in Miami say to me, don't move to Cork, you're going to get shot. And I'm sitting there going, I teach Islam, where every time I say I teach Islam, they're like, you're not a terrorist, are you? And I'm just like, here it's kind of just moved to do you know what I mean? And it's how we've kind of built these imaginations in our head of what people are like. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are still people who, you know, want to harm people, you know.
Yeah.
But
some people don't. Sorry, James.
No, it's just stereotypes.
I was just thinking, like, some of these people that, like, the gap between the Protestants and the Catholics, some of them don't even know why they're fighting. It's just passed on through generation. Oh, stay away from them, they're this or that, and like, some of these kids are just being brainwashed. And
it reminds me of, you know, I had a friend who lived in Ibrox, which is where Rangers are, and I've never been to an Old Firm match or anything, right? But most of my family are actually Celtic supporters, except one of my brothers is a Rangers supporter, which is really interesting conversation. But
can imagine.
I remember once going to see my friend who lived round the corner from Ibrox, but there was an Old Firm match, and it was the first time I heard the chanting, you know, the kind of sectarian chanting. And I thought, my goodness, this is like a lesson on kind of religion. And the stuff they were saying doesn't even make sense. And I was like, what is going on? And it was all this male bravado with their tenants lagers and kind of this to the Pope and this to the Queen. And I was just like, and I was sitting there with my friend, I was like, this doesn't actually make sense. And he goes, well, a lot of discrimination that we have against people doesn't make sense. And I was just like, I know this, but it took me, you know, that moment to be in the thick of it to actually see it. But it's continuing. I mean, it's how these things get all overlapped, you know, like talking about kind of Celtic and then talking about Irishness and then talking about Catholicism and then being anti. Do you know what I mean? And it just kind of goes on, and that's exactly what I see. When some people talk about Islam or talk about Muslims, and it just spirals into this absolutely incoherent conclusion. You're just like, this doesn't make sense.
I think maybe a Glaswegian Celtic supporters' idea of who we are in Ireland, I think they might be disappointed when they come over here and we're not walking around with AKs and, you know, baiting down the British embassy to get out the door, you know.
Yeah.
But I think we're after drifting so far away in life as humans to be arguing over a religion, over a difference in a religion. Like, why, you know?
You see, the thing is with this sectarian thing with the nationalists and loyalists only became the religious thing later. It was like in Ireland's fight for freedom over the centuries, it was Irishness, and lots of Catholics or lots of Protestants fought and died for that Irish cause. One of the most famous being Theobald Wolfe Tone and the United Irishmen in the 17th century. And there was lots of Protestants died for Ireland's freedom, you know. It just became sectarian around the partition and stuff like that, but that's not actually the cause of it. And then stuff like in feuds and traveller families as well, like stuff just goes on, and you just socialise it. Nobody actually understands the root cause of it. But all you know is that that's a community over there that you're not a part of, and you have conflict with them. And I think there's so many conflicts around the world that are just legacy conflicts that don't really make sense.
And that's the complex part of the human being, really.
But it's about actually reflecting on this, because I think one of the biggest questions that we're going to have to deal with in Ireland is, what does it mean to be Irish? because I grew up in Scotland where that mantra about we're all Jock Tamson's bairns, I don't know if you've heard that before. No. It basically means that we're all Jock Tamson's bairns. We're all this big family. Whoever Jock Tamson was, but we're, you know, I don't hear that enough in Ireland. Mm-hmm. I don't hear, it is changing, but this kind of broad tent Scottishness that I grew up with, where my dad having this corner shop, and my dad's name was Inayat, but the local Glaswegian women would call my dad Willie, because it was easier obviously to call him Willie than call him Inayat. My dad was seen as Scottish, but whereas, and my mum is seen as Scottish because my mum has a very interesting Glaswegian accent now, which, you know, totally blew me away when she came to Cork. I don't hear that enough in Ireland, and I don't hear it from white people. And when I speak to if I could call them the new immigrants who have come maybe from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, wherever, I don't think they have this very deep sense of belonging, because they're still separate in some way. Funnily enough, I don't know how this has happened, I feel more, and it's probably because I've got a Scottish accent and I can talk about Glasgow, and I kind of like, you know, and it's funny because people say to me, "Man, you've kind of gelled into Ireland," and I said it's because I'm second generation Scottish. Yeah. Right? And so don't think that Scotland turned overnight to embrace its new individuals. I mean, again, the racism and stuff that my parents had to endure, you know, in order for me to now stand up and, you know, be invited by the Scottish government in Dublin's, you know, parties and stuff, and I turn up there in a kilt, and of course they wheel me out because they're like, "Oh, look, we've got this brown guy who's got a Scottish accent and he wears a kilt." But it takes time. Yeah. But we need to do that in Ireland. I say that because I feel a part of this question. I've been here now since 2015. I feel a part of it. And I think if we don't ask these difficult questions, if we don't start thinking about are we categorizing Irishness with a specific religion? Are we categorizing it with a specific colour of your skin? We're going to all fail, because we're all going to lose. But it requires us to discuss this and to try to see what can we do to make sure that this Irishness is a much more broader tent, because then it's going to affect. And
I think for the unity of the island, which we all hope to get at some stage, we're going to have to come away from the idea that we're going to have to beat everybody into this tricolour and beat everybody into this national anthem, because that's not going to fly. And it's going to have to be more inclusive. And this idea of Irishness as being like we're not caught up in specific colours and specific songs. You know, we can keep our culture, we can integrate other cultures.
We can be different. What's the problem? The thing is, we want to keep boxing people, stuffing people into boxes. You guys probably get that, you know, when you're talking about where you came from, or people keep wanting to stuff me into this town head. You're from a council estate. Know where you belong. And I turn around and I'm just like, excuse me, you know, I've got a doctor in front of my name, and I play that when I need to do it. Do you know what I mean? You kind of think about, how did that happen? And it's about trying to understand how we make sure that, you know, all these different categorizations of you're lower than me, you're higher than me, and it's all nonsense.
Have you experienced Islamophobia in your time in Cork?
Subtle ways, but I think
institutional or personal or both, or
both. It's but I think that I think people are scared of me. People don't really know how to deal with me, and I'm very vocal. If I see something that's wrong, I will speak up about it.
That's what they're afraid of.
And I will fight. I will fight a battle that I think is needed. There's many battles that I walk away going, this is for my mental health. I can't do this. I'm not going to do it, and it's not something that's needed to be done. But I will put up a fight where I believe that it's going to help me and also other people. You know, I'm the chair of the Race Equality Forum at the university. This is a new forum that's been set up because universities in Ireland are now beginning to take seriously that we have a racism problem. Not just within our universities, but, you know, outside of our universities, because universities are not bubbles. They're part of society.
Exactly.
You know, and that needs to, that's affecting our students who, if you know that saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I think that is just, that just makes me, I get people come up to me, they're like, oh my God, you grew up in a council estate, you're a head of a department. I'm like, you can be that as well. But you can be that as well, as long as we keep questioning the structures, because our structures can stop us from getting there. Do you know what I mean?
And our core beliefs that we're limited to what we can see in front of us or around us.
Yeah.
You know, like we can completely relate to that.
Yeah.
Coming from the council estate or the crazy or poor areas where there's loads of crime.
Yeah.
But one of the main reasons we have this podcast and we bring on so many people like us is because we need to change people's perception of that within our own areas where we grew up and leave. Sorry, James.
Yeah.
And like it's about teaching parents of young children to teach their kids in these areas that their kids can do anything.
Yeah.
You know, not putting any limitations on them. It's about telling them, do you know what, John or Mary, you can actually be anything you want, and start talking to these kids like that at a really young age, instead of saying, he's stupid at maths, why would he want to be going into college or anything like that? That's creating another belief within him. You know?
And mental and physical strength is all the wealth that you need. If you're not strong in yourself, if we're not empowering people to have that strength, they're not going to be able to do anything. There are people living in palaces who feel that they're broken. You know, they're carrying traumas. No matter how much luxury or wealth they've got, I don't believe that's going to give you everything that you want. Sure, you know, you've got your money, you can go traveling, but there's other riches, you know, that what are we doing to empower people? And I'm not taking away from the fact that, you know, okay, so you could be mentally, but you don't have food on the table. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that I look at my students and I think, what can I enrich this student with so that when they go away, they think about things, and that when you have that strength of mind, you will grow and you will gain. You know, when I grew up, to be honest with you, I never chased money. I never thought. People used to say to me, "You're going to be very poor. Why are you studying religion?" And you know what? I thank God's blessing that I feel so blessed with what I've got.
When I was doing my masters in criminology, there's a few people who say to me, "What jobs are you going to get out of an arts masters?" No, I said, I'm interested in it. I want to learn something. Do you know what I mean?
And that just goes back to the way we speak to our kids. Like, you had it in your area, what are you going on to do, studying religion, criminology, and that brings us back. Like, it's continuous the whole way up. You don't have to be a child to be told you can't do this, can't do that, whatever.
But it's the philosophy around, like, education is not just about creating workers. Do you know what I mean? It's about developing people to follow whatever they want. But one thing I wanted to touch on there before you go into me is when you spoke about choosing your battles. Now, my wife is a traveller, and I don't know how many times I've been in situations where stuff is said and I can feel the hurt in her. And she doesn't address it, because if you would address it all the time, you'd be doing it every day, and it would wear you down. But on other occasion then, she would address it. So I could completely understand.
You pick your battles.
You do.
You know.
You do.
But you wake up every day. I wake up every day, and I think, you know, I'm not like the majority of people that I see in the street. I'm not like the majority of people that I see in the university. What am I going to do? How do I work through that so that I don't continually think of myself as a victim? but I also do something because I think I think in my soul I must be a teacher. I always want to make a teaching moment to get people to think about it.
It is. I think the difference between yourself and her, or for somebody of colour and a traveller, is more often than not, a traveller looks like everybody else, and people can be more explicit about how they say stuff, whereas if somebody is racist but they're in the presence of somebody that's brown or black or whatever, it might slip out, or they mightn't say it at all. But sometimes for people that are travellers that don't go around with a big traveller sign on their back, the racism can be very explicit, and then you're sitting there and you're like, oh my god, like what do I do here?
But we're in the same boat, if
totally,
I could call it that, you know. And to be honest with you, it's been a huge learning curve for me being in Ireland to hear about, you know, some of the really difficult scenarios that Irish travellers have had to go through. And when I hear the stories, I'm just like, oh my goodness, it's exactly the same what we go through, and it's the names and it's about, it's not about the physical bit, it's about bringing that person down in their brain so that they have no confidence. And I just think, gosh, this is we've got to counter that. We've got to continually counter that. And I on Twitter I see there's some brilliant people who do it day in, day out. I worry about them a wee bit. Like I'm on Twitter as well, but I take a break because I have privilege. You know, I have a house, I can go away, I can go on a wee holiday. But people who don't have that privilege and they have to continually fight that, and they're on Twitter and they're it's just it's so sad to see that.
That's unhealthy for you as well. You know,
to switch off is a huge privilege.
Yeah, but if you're fighting your cause on Twitter, you're never going to win on Twitter, because for every
so many different opinions, like,
and it doesn't matter if you have the best argument in the world backed up by 2 PhDs and 3 books, somebody's always going to say I disagree, and you don't even go there. You're better off.
I was going to say there about your classes in the college. For anybody that would have any form of interest in what you teach, like my initial thought was, okay, this man talks about religions and stuff, but there's so much depth to you as a person. You know, there's so much character, you know, charisma, you're full of energy. And
I'd say your lectures are fun and engaging.
And I also think it's a little bit of a philosophy class as well, where you're learning a little bit about life, maybe a bit of spirituality, and teaching people how to change their own lives and how to be more open-minded with everybody else around us, you know, because that's what I'm after getting from this interview here is there's so much depth. I'd say you could go into a number of other areas and start teaching maybe a little bit of psychology.
I really want whoever I speak to go away thinking about themselves. I don't want, there's a lot of people who are so self-centered that they're like, I want everybody to be like me. I don't. I'll give you one example. I had a student once who took an evening class of mine in Glasgow. And he came, the first day of the class, I always say, why are you doing this class, right? And so there were two. One of them turned around and said, I'm doing this class because your people are killing my people, and I want to know what it is that your people are doing to kill my people. And I was just like, okay, we just park that and we'll just go on. And then there was another guy who turned around and said, I'm really interested in Islam. I'm doing this course. I'm going to convert to Islam. I was just like, so from that to that, right? And basically what happened was the person who said, your people are killing my people, she went away going, I was completely wrong, I'm really sorry about this. And I was just like, but at some level, there are some of my people who are doing that, so I want you to keep that in mind. And the guy who wanted to convert to Islam, he went away going, you've made me a better Catholic. And I went away going, that's basically what I wanted to do. Because I think everybody's on their own personal search.
I think so.
And I really have Islam, like Christianity, we're religions that believe in missionary work, that believe in I personally don't like conversion. When I hear of people converting to Islam, I'm just like, what are you converting to? Do you want to convert Islam isn't this bubble. Do you want to convert to the Islam that my parents brought from Pakistan? Are you going to start eating curries and making naan and all the rest of it? And I just think that searching within yourself, you'll be able to find even people who are finding, and I hear this a lot amongst queer individuals who are having a real difficult time with religion, and religion is this huge heavy burden. Like, queer Muslims are going through a very difficult time, and I always say to them, try to find an alternative voice.
What is a queer Muslim?
Gay man.
Oh, gay man.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, who feel
I haven't
Islam
heard
is
that.
just...
I haven't heard that. I haven't
didn't-
heard
I didn't-
that
yeah.
word in a long,
Yeah.
long time.
I know.
Yeah.
I didn't even know we could say queer.
Yeah, well, the word is, I think, kind of being what's the word? It's being...
People are using it as a term of empowerment
yes,
now.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll be able to see this, even people who are saying, our clothing is also gendered, so we should be able to wear what we want, and we want to do this, and religions often try to give a very particular way, and and understand that within Islam, as I said to you about these particular ways of people understanding masculinity. But I always say, try to find something. There has to be something, whether it be in the poetry, whether it be find an individual. You always find a rebel.
Yeah.
You always find a rebel, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes, that I love Urdu poetry, and I always listen to the poetry which says stuff like, look, try to find the hidden gems amongst those who have been totally destroyed, because that peril is often so resilient. And that's been written by a religious person.
Yeah.
And I think, what is it that makes that person kind of want to do that, and kind of still find some strength in a tradition which they may feel is very difficult for them.
And when you think about it too, the religions in the context of the history of humanity is, the religions that we've been speaking about tonight are relatively recent in relation.
Yeah.
But when you think about like the time of the pyramids and the Celts and all that, like all the texts that have been written, like, can you imagine, right? Karl Marx wrote, the Communist Manifesto, and Durkheim and Weber and all these sociologists, philosophers, and all these famous books. Can you imagine if we didn't have them, and all we had was like paragraphs? Just you was to think about like all the stuff we have today in terms of religion, philosophy, sociology, and all that stuff. What about all the stuff that was from thousands of years ago that we never got to read, and all that wisdom that was lost? And like before these religions, there was other religions, and I don't know, am I confused? But like, I listen to a lot of philosophy. I read philosophy, and I like that abstract thought, and I read existential philosophy, the meaning of life and what's the purpose of all this, and then but there's a part of me that's very spiritual. Adele, I think for a person in recovery from addiction, it's that you have to be some bit spiritual to help you get through that hardship, and to look for something outside you.
Finding meaning.
Yeah.
But remember, to read is a privilege. Like my mum can't. When my mum came, she reads the Quran every day, but she can't understand what she's reading, right? Like my mum can barely sign her name. It's actually quite funny. I shouldn't laugh, but I've seen my mum sign her name, and then she goes, "I think I've forgotten how to sign my name again." So I think it's important to kind of remember that we've also programmed ourselves to think that if you can't read or write, you must be thick. That is absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
My mum is more brainier than me. My mum can knock the living daylights out of the most intellectual person that I know in any Oxford or Cambridge.
Yeah.
And it's because she knows her surroundings. It's because she's streetwise. She's gone through difficulty. She's bathed with buffaloes. She's lived in poverty. She's an entrepreneur. She's amazing.
She's a mother.
She's a mother. Absolutely.
Mother.
Yeah, she's a mother of 7 kids. And 18 or is it 19 grandchildren, and I don't know how many. I just totally lose count. But it's about. Again, we have to stop thinking about things in such a simplistic way. that people who go to university, people who have got an education, people who have got this little piece of paper that hangs on the wall, they're some sort of great bastions of intellectualism. I have met people who have never seen the sight of a school, who I sit and I think, my goodness, I know nothing.
100%. And you know, I remember when I was in the first year social science unit community in UCC, I had a lecture, obviously I won't name the lecturer, but we had a lecture from this guy, and it was in that moment I thought to myself, you know what, just because they're lecturers doesn't mean they know everything, because this fella I didn't agree with anything he was saying, and I felt that, like, my idea of an academic was, like, you present your argument and the evidence, and you let the student make up his own argument, and if he's got a counter argument, that's okay, as long as objectivity and all these things. But he was like, this is the only way and any other way is wrong, and that moment I thought, you know what, no, I won't be putting academics up on pedestals anymore. And if he's in that job, there's no reason I can't do a better job than him,
because you had to live experience of what he was talking, and you know it was wrong.
But we're socialised to believe that people working in universities are this almighty intelligence that are above everybody else. But I suppose one of the big motivations for us to start this podcast was to have people share their stories to inspire others. But it was also like, me and Timmy have been privileged to come through what we've come through and have university education and to live comfortable lives today. But a lot of the people that access the podcast haven't had the privilege. And we wanted to, like, people didn't have to, people in the prison that are watching this, people in treatment centres, old folks' homes, or at the home, they didn't have to go to UCC and do a degree to hear you explain religion and the philosophy of religion and the diversities of religion. So that's me and Timmy's job done. Might spark an interest for somebody. They might enrol in the course.
I hope they do, because they learn a lot.
Everybody's paths are different. But, you know, I hope that in some way we learn, whether it be from reading a book or sitting under a tree and contemplating how this tree is going to go from this colour to this colour, and something's going to grow in it and something's not going to grow in it, and what's happening underneath the ground. I mean, that in itself, you don't need a book to tell you that. Get outside and learn that. We learned that in our council estates. You know, when I used to sit and look at this 24-storey building, and I was just like, I wonder what it's like living at the very top of that. You know,
it's a curiosity.
How is it that? And you know, somebody said to me, I don't know whether this is true, but these really, really high-rise buildings, they shake sometimes a wee bit in the wind. I don't know whether somebody was pulling my leg, but it's the way that they're architecturally done. And I used to think, oh my God, that building's going to fall on us, because it was always very, very windy in Townhead. And it's just, you know, that makes you think about lots of things. That
if you have a natural curiosity, follow it. And if people take anything from the podcast today, is be a bit open-minded, learn a little bit more, learn about the different religions, different cultures. There's no one better than anyone or any other. A funny story, I was mad to go to Iran, right? So I wanted to go to Iran because it's just a completely different culture. And what would it be like to be taken from this culture and put into that culture for a week or two? And Gillian is like, my wife, she's like this feminist, and said, I shouldn't have to wear that and all this. I said, no, you're looking at it from the perspective of here. But like, it's different over there, and it's not that our culture is better than theirs, because they probably say the same about us. It's just the experience. But I suppose the point I'm making is, like, our culture is not the greatest culture in the world. Do you know what I mean? But it's good for us, and their culture is good for them, and the diversity is what makes the world go round.
You said it well ago. You can have a bit of everything. Try this. Just because you're a Muslim man, it doesn't mean that you have to get married to your second cousin. Your marriage can be arranged. You know, it doesn't.
But we've got a lot to be proud about in Ireland. You know, you're saying it's not the best culture, but you know, it's our home. You know,
it's not better than another culture.
I agree with you, but I still think that, you know, that kind of pride is still important. Like, we can kind of be modest in who we are, but I also think we have to have pride in our nation.
Oh, definitely.
We're not perfect, you know, but
do you know what makes this nation very proud? Emma? When we have a good soccer team. Bring back the days of Jack Charlton, and then we'll be a nation once again.
But I think the land of the saints and the scholars, and our contribution towards literature and song and music and all these things probably make me proud to be an Irishman, especially when you go abroad, because that's what people associate with Ireland, other than Guinness. Thanks for your time. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and if people want to contact you or follow you, you're on social media, Twitter. And
yeah, I'm on Twitter at De Sondy, which is my second name altogether, and I'm on Instagram, but I really just use that to chat to my nieces and nephews who tell me that I need to be a bit more cool.
And we link your UCC research profile if people want to follow up an interest, or if you sparked an interest, they can access your stuff there. So thanks a million.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Take care.
Bye bye.